AOC thought she had the upper hand until Senator Kennedy delivered one line that completely destroyed her argument, leaving the entire room stunned. It was a crisp morning in early 2025, and the air inside the Capitol Hill committee room buzzed with anticipation. The hearing, part of a broader discussion on economic policy and proposed tax reforms, had drawn a packed audience of lawmakers, staffers, and journalists. The topic was contentious: a Republican-backed bill aimed at reducing corporate taxes to stimulate economic growth, which Democrats argued would disproportionately benefit the wealthy and widen income inequality. At the center of this storm were two figures known for their rhetorical firepower: Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, a Republican with a knack for sharp-witted quips, and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, a Democratic firebrand, whose passionate advocacy for progressive policies had made her a national figure. The room was a blend of old-school grandeur and modern tension, with mahogany paneling and rows of lawmakers seated at long tables, their aides whispering updates and passing notes. Cameras from C-SPAN and major news networks were trained on the proceedings, capturing every gesture and word for a nation hungry for political drama. The hearing had been simmering for hours, with technical debates over tax brackets and economic data, occasionally punctuated by partisan jabs. But the atmosphere shifted when AOC rose to speak, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. AOC's opening, Ocasio-Cortez, dressed in a sharp blazer and standing at her microphone, was in her element. Known for her ability to command attention, she leaned into her remarks with the intensity of someone who had spent years honing her message on social media and in community halls. Her focus was economic fairness, a hallmark of her political brand since her 2018 upset victory over a Democratic incumbent. She gripped the edges of her notes, her eyes scanning the room as she addressed the committee. Mr. Chairman, Senator Kennedy, and distinguished colleagues. AOC began, her voice steady but rising with conviction. We are here today discussing a tax policy that claims to boost the economy, but let's be clear. This bill is a handout to corporations and the ultra-wealthy, paid for by the sweat and struggle of hardworking American families. Senator Kennedy knows very well that the system is broken. For decades, the top 1% have rigged the rules to hoard wealth, while wages for the average worker have barely budged. This bill doesn't fix that, it doubles down on it. She paused, letting her words settle. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of cameras and the occasional shuffle of papers. AOC's ability to frame complex issues in relatable terms had always been her strength, and she leaned into it now. I hear from my constituents in the Bronx and Queens every day: nurses, teachers, small business owners who are drowning in rent increases, medical bills, and childcare costs. Meanwhile, corporations are sitting on record profits, dodging taxes through loopholes we've allowed to fester. This isn't economic growth, it's economic betrayal. Her voice rose as she pointed to the Republican side of the room. You can't stand here and tell the American people you're on their side when you're pushing policies that widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. We need courage to fight for the working class, not more giveaways to those who already have it all. The Democrats in the room nodded approvingly, some clapping softly. AOC's words echoed her long-standing advocacy for policies like the Green New Deal and Medicare for All, which had galvanized young voters and progressives across the country. Her remarks were a direct challenge to the Republican narrative, and all eyes turned to the GOP side for a response. That's when Senator John Kennedy, seated near the center of the Republican bench, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. Kennedy's razor-sharp rebuttal. Kennedy, a former trial lawyer with a folksy demeanor and a penchant for memorable one-liners, was no stranger to high-stakes verbal sparring. His southern drawl and disarming humor often masked the precision of his arguments, but those who knew him expected a response that would cut deep. As AOC finished, Kennedy raised his hand, signaling to the chairman that he wished to speak. The room seemed to hold its breath. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. Kennedy began, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of someone who knew he was about to land a punch. Passion without facts is just noise, and facts don't care about feelings. The chamber went silent. AOC, standing at her podium, froze for a split second, her expression a mix of surprise and defiance. Kennedy's opening line was a direct shot, dismissing her emotional appeal while setting the stage for a methodical takedown. He leaned back slightly, his hands clasped on the table, and continued, "Let's talk about this broken system you mentioned. You say corporations are hoarding wealth, but let's look at the numbers. Since the last tax reform, corporate investment in American jobs has increased by 20% in key sectors. Unemployment is at historic lows, including for minority communities, something your party used to care about. Now, I'm not saying everything's perfect, but you don't fix a leaky roof by burning the house down." A few chuckles rippled through the Republican side, and even some Democrats shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Kennedy's ability to blend data with metaphor was disarming, and he wasn't done. "You talk about courage, Congresswoman, but it's not courageous to promise free everything while ignoring the math. Your plan's Medicare for all, the Green New Deal carry price tags in the tens of trillions. You can raise your voice all you want, but it won't turn fiction into truth." AOC's face tightened, her lips pursed as she scribbled notes, clearly preparing a rebuttal. But Kennedy pressed on, his tone never rising above a conversational drawl. "You say this bill is a handout to the wealthy. Let's be clear, 80% of the tax cuts in this proposal go to small businesses, mom and pop shops, not just big corporations. Those are the folks employing half of America's workforce. You want to talk about working families? They're the ones who will suffer if we choke off the businesses that pay their wages." The room was now fully in Kennedy's grip. His slow, deliberate delivery contrasted sharply with AOC's fiery rhetoric, making her seem almost frantic by comparison. He leaned forward again, fixing his gaze on her. "I respect your passion, Congresswoman, but passion alone doesn't pay the bills. You can't just wave a wand and make the economy fairer by taxing everyone into oblivion. That's not courage, it's fantasy." AOC's struggle to respond. The chairman gave AOC the floor to respond, and she stood, visibly rattled but determined to regain her footing. "Senator Kennedy," she said, her voice steady but with a slight edge of frustration, "your facts are selective. Small businesses might benefit from some of these cuts, but the lion's share still goes to the top earners. The Economic Policy Institute shows that the top 1% have captured 82% of wealth created since the 2008 recession. That's not a leaky roof. That's a system designed to keep certain people on top." She gestured toward the audience, trying to recapture her momentum. "My constituents aren't asking for handouts. They're asking for a fair shot at a system where their labor isn't exploited to pad corporate profits. You talk about unemployment, but what about underemployment? What about the gig workers who can't afford health insurance? Your bill doesn't address that, it ignores it." But Kennedy was ready. He didn't wait for the chairman's permission this time, interjecting with a raised hand. "Congresswoman, with all due respect, you're dodging the point. You can cite all the studies you want, but the reality is you voted against every bipartisan proposal to fund job training programs, infrastructure, or even disaster relief for your own state. You call it exploitation, but when we try to fix the system, you're the one saying no. That's not fighting for the working class, that's grandstanding." The room erupted in murmurs. AOC's eyes widened, and for a moment she seemed caught off guard. Kennedy's accusation hit a nerve, referencing her documented votes against certain bipartisan bills, including a 2019 border funding package that she and other progressive Democrats had opposed on principle. The senator's ability to pivot from broad economic arguments to specific voting records was a masterclass in debate, and AOC struggled to respond. "I voted against those bills," she countered, "because they didn't go far enough to protect the most vulnerable. I won't support half measures that prop up a broken system while leaving millions behind." But her words lacked the fire of her opening, and the room sensed it. Kennedy's calm, fact-based approach had shifted the dynamic, making AOC's idealism seem less grounded by comparison, the viral explosion as the hearing adjourned. The exchange was already making waves. C-SPAN's live feed had captured every moment, and within minutes, clips of Kennedy's quips, "Passion without facts is just noise, and you can raise your voice, but it won't turn fiction into truth," were circulating on X and other platforms. Conservative commentators hailed Kennedy as a hero, with posts like, "Senator Kennedy just schooled AOC," racking up thousands of retweets. One X post, shared by @OJOSMOM06 on August 18, 2025, linked to a YouTube clip titled "Senator Kennedy Roasts AOC," and garnered millions of views, with users praising his unmatched humor and lethal delivery.